Democrats on Capitol Hill will have reached a significant milestone. A majority of them in the U.S. House of Representatives, 118 so far, have come out in favor of a formal impeachment inquiry. Let's talk more about this now with Peter Mathews. Peter, a professor of political science at Cypress College in Los Angeles and the author of Dollar Democracy on Steroids. Joining this hour from our London bureau. Good to have you with us, Peter.
Good to be here, George.
All right, so Peter, a number of Democrats want to make the case for impeachment. That number has grown now, a majority in the House, but still nowhere near the 218 needed to pass legislation through the House. The House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is still pushing members to be patient, but with this growing pressure to impeach, can Pelosi continue to hold that line, do you think?
It'll be very difficult. Now she has over half the Democrats, and don't forget she relies on the Democrats to put her in as Speaker every time. And this is a significant move that over half of them do want to begin formal impeachment inquiry, which is extremely important because when that began under President Nixon, then other people started changing their minds, including Republicans like Senator Baker, because the evidence came out. The formal inquiry allows a much more in-depth investigation and penalties for people perjuring themselves. So it's a very important development.
Let's also talk about Democrats, of course, if they do push ahead, if it does pass through the House. Look, it won't pass through the Senate. Republicans simply won't let that happen. So what is the real impact on President Trump if House Democrats do move forward with impeachment?
If they move forward and they actually do have the votes, if they have the votes to impeach, which they are the majority, and they could do it, then President Trump is sent to the Senate to stand trial. And the point is that the Republicans have the majority in the Senate, and therefore they probably will not vote to remove him. However, like I said before, once the investigation in the House begins, more information could come out that could change a few Republicans' minds as well. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but there's a good possibility. And I think the House should go forward with a constitutional required duty as opposed to waiting to see what the Senate will do. That has to be done in that manner, one step at a time.
Let's also talk about the Texas Representative John Ratcliffe, the Republican who Mr. Trump announced would nominate to take over for Dan Coats as Director of National Intelligence. Now he's out of the running. President Trump changing course, saying that scrutiny over his experience was overstated. Clearly, though, the White House did not vet this candidate, the president pointing out that he relies on the press, who he typically disparages, to do the vetting for the White House.
Yes, I think that's very true that Mr. Ratcliffe, there was a different reason, I think, it had to do with his background and what he did regarding some other things that were questionable. And the vetting process is extremely important because the president should not rely on the press. While the press is a very important agency in democracy to keep government accountable, he should have the government, his own government investigators find out exactly what these candidates have in their background that could compromise them, and rely on that, not the press. So I think that was quite a wrong move on his part to say the press is vetting, and sometimes you do a good job, sometimes you don't. What about the times the press doesn't do a good job? It's quite disingenuous to say that, I think, in my view, the way he put it, but that's the way it is.
All right,
I think
Peter,
it's very important to note that.
Let's also talk about the candidate himself, Ratcliffe, and his lack of experience. Many have looked into his past and pointed out many instances where his experience has been overstated.
Yeah, that's very true. And the point is the director of National Intelligence, the DNI, is an extremely important position because he coordinates all the other agencies' information as it comes in and summarizes it and makes reports to the president directly. And this person has to have experience, judgment, and understand how intelligence gathering works, what the significance of certain things are, what they're not. And that's why this representative congressman from Texas, Republican, would not necessarily be qualified for this. And that's why he decided to remove or withdraw the nomination in the end. So it's very important to note that those are some of the reasons, I think.
And does this expose the fact that there aren't enough people around the president to look out for things like this, Peter?
Once again, George, please.
Does this expose the possibility that President Trump may not have enough people around him to be on the lookout for things like this?
Absolutely, that seems to be the case, and that's really unfortunate, very wrong and dangerous because this kind of position is so extremely important for the United States security and other positions as well where the president needs to have people around him who have experience in investigating people that are up for a nomination, in finding out what their weaknesses are, and then confirming, saying to the president, look, these people are ready to go, these are not. That's a very important function of a top-notch advisor who the president needs and doesn't seem to have, unfortunately, as many as he needs them.
Peter Mathews with perspective for us there in London. Peter, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, George.